The Hogsty is brought to you by TicketClub.com, your one-stop shop for live events nationwide. Whether you're looking for game, theater, or live performance tickets, don't sweat it. TicketClub.com has you covered. So make sure you're going there for all your live entertainment needs, and make sure you're clicking over to them from the banner at the top of thehogsty.com.
The Hogsty presents It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and Rich Rogers. And now, here's your host, Chris Larry.
Good morning, guys, and it's time for another episode of the Hogsty It's Just Business. I am not your host, Chris Larry. I am your host, Rich Rogers, and I have my two other amigos with me, Steve and Alex. How you doing, guys?
I almost thought he said Alice for a minute, which is somebody entirely different than Alex.
That would be fine. I'm not picky about my name. I'll go by whatever you guys need to call me.
Well, let's not call you Alice, because that'll be a weird voice thing going on, and I don't like that. No, see, Chris is out for some unexplained reason, and so we thought we'd just completely shake things up today and bring in our regular fill-in co-host Alex.
Back up,
and then we'll give Rich the host role just to see what happens and to throw things into chaos, which is always fun. Chaos is good.
Whatever you do, never let Steve host, Rich. That's something I learned really early on our regular show.
Yeah, well, we'll see.
The problem with me hosting is that no one would get a word in edgewise. That's why I can't host.
Exactly.
Well, so you guys, we have a great show lined up, and we have two very important topics that we want to talk about. So before we get started, just want to say that we're very close to the start of the NFL season. So I just wanted to throw that in there. We have one meaningless preseason game left, so we'll just sort of march through that. But so the University of Maryland, I know there are a lot of Terrapins on that listen to our show and that are local here and across the country. And the University of Maryland is in a lot of hot water. Unless you've been under a rock, you would know that there was a tragic death of a 19-year-old offensive lineman, Jordan McNair. And Jordan McNair died of complications from apparent heat stroke. And since then, there have been many dominoes to fall. The former coach, DJ Durkin, was fired. Damon Evans, who is the current athletic director, is in a lot of hot water, and there's still a lot of questions to be answered. So, guys, let's jump right in right there with this University of Maryland thing and just some of the protocols with these athletes and what the university's obligation is, the athletic trainer is. And then also there's been a point that has been talked about here in local radio on whether is that actually the coach's response. So the trainers have been fired. So is it the responsibility of the head coach, even though he may not be directly that deep into the logistics of treatment and player treatment and how to handle heat stroke? So what do you guys think?
Well, yeah, of course it's his responsibility. It's his team. He's in charge. He's the head coach.
He sets the tone.
Yeah, the trainers work for him. In some capacity or another. I don't know who they report to from a legal standpoint, but from a basic common sense standpoint, those trainers are responsible to the head coach. And listen, I mean, this heat stroke stuff isn't new to the University of Maryland, okay? I mean, this is the type of thing, football players have heat stroke sometimes in summer. I mean, it's happened since the dawn of time. Happened when I played football. Some of the bigger linemen sometimes would get heat stroke. The problem here is the response of the training staff. They didn't take his vitals. Nobody really knew the full extent of the trouble he was in. Essentially, the simple way to say it is that the training staff did a very poor job in handling Jordan McNair's case, and the net result was it was that he died unnecessarily. If they had taken the appropriate steps, number one, vitals, he wouldn't have died. And so that's the major problem.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot of different things about how different organizations are structured, and it sounds like in the most cases, the training staff really is responsible for if somebody's hurt or sick, they're the ones who make those calls, not the head coach of, what to do. The coach obviously has no medical experience to say, hey, let's do XYZ next. I would be shocked if most coaches even know CPR.
Oh, yeah, that coaches don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, they don't have a medical background. So that really is the training staff's job, is to, that part. That said, yeah, the coach runs the team. He's created this culture of, he wanted this hard, bad boy culture, kind of what we used to see back in the day in the 70s and 60s, take a salt tablet kind of mentality. And, we've progressed. Technology and medical technology has progressed where you shouldn't have that kind of attitude anymore, especially when it comes to somebody who could seriously be, sick or, in this case, die. And this isn't the first time somebody's died in a football program, right? I mean, we've had this happen every couple years, and it's usually in training camps and practices that guys get sick and die from heat stroke or some other kind of illness. It's not like it was back in the 20s when you'd have 50 guys die a year, but it's happened every couple of years.
So here's the thing. I mean, and just to answer my own question, at the end of the day, this coach sat in this kid's living room and talked to his parents, and ultimately took responsibility once he enrolled and he was on the team at the University of Maryland. So he is ultimately responsible. If I had a child, I would be looking at that coach, said, I sent my child to your school with the understanding that you are responsible for him. So there's that. And then the second part of this is, and I for those of you that don't know, I work with kids and I'm an administrator in the school, and there are many protocols for safety protocols when you're dealing with other people's kids. And one negligent moment where you let your guard down, you cannot afford to go rogue or off script, because these are that 4,999th time that you get away with something like that. It's that one time, it's that 5,000th time where you can have a tragedy like this. So there was even talk on whether the prosecutor, whether Durkin would be charged for negligent homicide. And Steve, you could probably speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, negligent homicide means that the actions that, in simple terms, means that the actions you took or failed to take were, how do you say it in civilian terms? It's, you should have done something that a reasonable person would have done, or you did something that a reasonable person would not have done that was bad enough that it resulted in somebody's death. That's, in simple terms, is what negligent homicide is. There's not an intent element to it. Like murder in the first degree requires an intent element. Right. This is, you were negligent, meaning you did something you shouldn't have done, or you didn't do something you should have done, and a death in...
Somebody died.
Yeah, that's basically what negligent homicide
is. It kind of the equivalent, just for laymen, like manslaughter would be?
Well, manslaughter in some jurisdictions is the classic scenario where you catch your spouse in bed with someone else and you lose your mind and you shoot them. That's what manslaughter is in many jurisdictions. It's I made an instantaneous decision because I went nuts. Nuts is a wrong term.
Got it.
Because I lost my mind. So no, some jurisdictions are different, but yeah. Look, you guys are more in tune with the University of Maryland football than I am. Am I wrong in saying, Alex, you touched on this, that DJ Durkin has a reputation of being a very hard-nosed old-school coach?
I mean, that's what it's been painted as since... I mean, here's my thing. I don't care about University of Maryland at all. I grew up in Northern Virginia and, live in D.C., so...
Okay, Rich knows that.
The amount of craps I give about the University of Maryland football is less than zero. I just make fun of them because they have those awful uniforms, and then I move on with my day. So, but yeah, the reputation that has come out since this happened on the radio and in sports media is that, yeah, he wants to be, like I said, the 1960s, 70s type hard-nosed coach.
I mean, if you guys remember the movie Remember the Titans, which is sort of the classic football movie of all time. Does everybody remember Denzel Washington?
Yeah, saying, Coach Herman Boone.
Yeah.
Water makes you weak. Yeah. Remember this?
Right.
That used to be a football mentality, and it's changed.
Yeah.
It wasn't even that way when I played football.
It's changed because people realize how fundamentally stupid.
You played football, Steve?
I mean,
I did. I played football and varsity football in high school. Yeah.
All right. What position?
I was primarily a DB.
All right.
It's not to say I was that good at it, but I did play. People who listen to Hawkside know that. Okay. But here's my point. Durkin may be a hard-nosed coach, but that's not the problem. The problem here is that the training staff failed. Okay? And the problem with football training staffs, it's always been to me, is that these people are required to make medical decisions, and they're not doctors. They're not nurses. Training staff, yes, athletic trainers do have some medical education, but fundamentally they're not doctors. And they should know that if you have a kid collapse, it's time to call a medical professional. They didn't do that in this case. As far as I know, they didn't do that.
But the coach sets the tone. And when they, a lot has been made about the culture at the University of Maryland with the athletic program. If you had a training staff, I'm quite sure the training staff knew what to do, but maybe the culture of the program was, well, is he not as sick as he is appearing to be? Is he being quote unquote soft? I think that tone is set by the coach.
There's no doubt that true. And, I heard rumors that, the coach told some other players to pick this kid up and drag him across the finish line and the sprint drills they were doing. And if that's the case, yeah, that's on the coach, for sure. Because that's just not the response to a kid who's collapsed. And you should know the difference between a player. You should be able to look at a player and know that the difference between quitting and a medical emergency. Or a medical event. Sure. And if that is the case, yes, that's directly on the coach. So let me amend. Certainly. So that needs to be figured out. I mean, does the culture of a high-level football team need to change? Is this something that is probably unique to the University of Maryland in terms of the coach's response? Or would we see this in every other Division I program out there?
See, I don't know about the attitude, this callous attitude towards his players. I mean, there's certain things that definitely need to change in any program if they're doing it. And I brought to your guys' attention this morning the part of the story where it turns out that DJ Durkin and Kevin Anderson were using school funds to pay for players' sexual assault cases. And, that's the kind of stuff that if that's going on in any program, you just got to fire everybody.
Yeah, let's just stop there and talk about this. First of all, that is, if you want to read about this, this is on the WTOP website under / Maryland. It'll be in there. And the article is called Lawyer for UMD Players Accused of Sexual Assault Says Head Coach Not Athletic or Director Hired Him. And the problem here isn't that the head coach found these kids a lawyer, because, these are kids and the head coach –
Someone's going to have
to help them. Yeah, the problem is that with the Maryland funds part, okay? Because Maryland is a public university which has funds allocated to it from the state of Maryland and from the federal government, both. And basically, and the coach and the athletic director have discretionary pots that they can spend stuff on, and there's rules about what they can and can't spend it on. One of them, almost assuredly, is not hire lawyers for players accused of sexual assault. Criminal lawyers. And yeah, it's only $15,000, but that's $15,000 of public funds. And so to me, that's.
I mean, $15,000 is probably still someone's tuition, isn't it? I mean, I don't even know what
it's
tuition
part of
costs,
it's somebody's. It's part of somebody's tuition at least. Yeah. And that's certainly not what. The discretionary fund should have been spent on either. You can't give tuition away. But the point is, most definitely public funds should not have been spent on players' criminal attorneys' fees. That's a whole nother level, a whole nother separate problem, with this. And look, I applaud the coach for trying to help the kids. He just went about it the wrong way.
I don't actually have a problem with him finding lawyers, but in these days with all the sexual assault stuff that's been going on in public universities, you got to watch out for that. With you got to take a 10-foot pole approach, basically.
I mean, it has nothing to do with.
If you're going to get them lawyers, sure, but you can't even let them stay on the team until it's
I mean,
I think that the one of the issues is what is the gray area here is what is the responsibility of a head football coach, and we'll talk about this more later, but what is the responsibility of a head football coach with their communication with the university? And then what's the university's responsibility? So is it that, okay, that the coach learns about these allegations of sexual misconduct or allegations of a sexual crime, and then the coach takes the responsibility in his own lane to find lawyers without reporting it to the university? I think that's the issue as well.
Do we know that he didn't report it to the university?
We don't.
Well, clearly, since the money came out of Kevin Anderson's account, it sounds like at some point he told
AD at a minimum.
Told Kevin Anderson, yeah,
at a minimum. Look, this stuff, we're not picking on the University of Maryland. They did this to themselves, number one. But number two,
right?
This doesn't surprise me at all. And I think this could happen at almost any big program. One of the constant themes that we've talked about in this show since the inception are problems at universities. Problems that these high-level football and basketball programs in particular continually do. And the missing Chris Larry said it right. It's hubris. It's universities and coaches and athletic directors and boosters and supporters putting the football team and the basketball team ahead of everything else, including what's right. And the reason they are doing that is, make no mistake, it's money and only money. The University of Maryland wants the University of Maryland football team to continue. And they want DJ Durkin there because they think he's a good coach, and they think that he can bring the program into prominence and thereby make money. And one kid with a medical problem isn't going to stand in the way of that. He hadn't been fired. Has DJ Durkin been fired? Is he going to get fired for this?
He's been
fired.
Has
been fired.
Okay,
yes.
He's been fired. Yeah. Fine. They're going to find another coach who's just as callous. Doing these stories every other week for me has made me slowly more and more disgusted with Division I athletics.
Yeah. Steve, I think, and you and I have talked about this on other shows and just, when we're not hitting record, but I've kind of always been in the camp that I think we need to kind of spin all the athletic programs off of the schools, period, that it shouldn't be affiliated with the college anymore. It sounds like you're going to start coming to my end at some point.
I like the idea of students coming to university and being able to compete and play a sport as a sort of a general rule.
Philosophically, yeah, that sounds great, but in practice, it's just not working.
Yeah,
anymore.
In practice, it's not working anymore. And so when you say spin them off, I don't know really what you mean by that. You may not know what you mean by that in detail either. Because if you have, you get rid of the University of Maryland football program and you create a separate entity. Well, who controls that entity? Is it controlled by the university? Is it funded by boosters? Does it come under the umbrella of the university system? There's a whole lot of issues with that, and I don't know what the answer is. I just know that what we're doing now is bastardizing and smearing and destroying the original intent of the college student athlete.
So I think essentially the big issue is you're trusting that schools are able to govern themselves. And in time again, they've been found that they can't. And then once let's say the S hits the fan, many schools feign ignorance or they go into damage control. So to me, it just sounds like there needs to be some, and I don't know who would govern it, but there needs to be some independent accountability measure for these schools, because you can't trust these schools to govern themselves. And we know that, let's just say this, we know that there are some, Class A, Division I programs who do things right. So I don't want to say it's everyone. But
well, I'll counter that and say that the guys I've known, or because I'm a fan of some college football teams. I'm not a huge NCAA guy, but the coaches that I see who run clean programs, they don't last very long in the big program schools. They go to somewhere like, an SEC school, and suddenly they're winning 8 games a year, and they get fired for it.
Yeah.
So, I think when the money becomes the number one thing, and that's, SEC, Big Ten, a lot of these programs, this is what happens. I think it ties into it.
Yeah, and it's not just the SEC and the Big Ten. It's every power conference.
No, it's right, all the power conferences. I was just listing
I lost
two,
all faith in college in the big-time Division I athletics when Penn State didn't get the death penalty.
Same with Baylor for that matter.
After that, I was just like, okay, what do we do?
Yeah, and I totally agree with you, Rich. I was disgusted by that. I will never root for Penn State University ever again. I wouldn't recommend anybody attend Penn State or Baylor University. What really more disgusted me about that, and I haven't seen this too much with this University of Maryland scandal, but in the case of Penn State and Baylor both, particularly Penn State, the fans and the alumni just backing it up to the last moment. I mean, Joe Paterno could do no wrong, and they supported it and defended it. I don't know how you can defend that school. I don't know how you can do it.
There's a troll we used to have on our blog who would constantly come up there and defend Joe Paterno, and it's been 5 years now since that happened. And there's still this one guy who was
I went
there.
So I went to a small liberal arts school, and we were division at that time. We didn't even have a football team, but we got the team back in 2008. So now we compete in Division 2. But I do know about school pride. I mean, I am, Mr. Lincoln University. I mean, you cannot say anything bad about my school. But so I do understand this blind allegiance. Now, that's not to say that, if there was rapes.
I think Steve and I feel the same way about our
I mean, so I get it. But I don't know if I would go as far to say if there were rapes and things occurring that I would want to crawl into a hole somewhere.
Yeah. I totally agree. I mean, children haven't been raped in the school, football, facility showers at my school. I would not defend that.
No. If something like that happened, okay, so I went to Temple, and something weird did happen with Bill Cosby there.
Right.
That kind of got swept under the rug when I was in school.
And you haven't defended that either.
No. But I'm just saying it happened, and the school defended it at the time.
But in terms of this University of Maryland thing, I haven't seen that kind of reaction from the fan base. I'm not in the D.C. area. Rich, you would know better than either one of us because you were more in tune with Maryland than Alex or I. I haven't seen that. Here just the alumni blindly defending this. And I mean, look, Maryland fired the coach. You're just, right? I mean, so Durkin's gone.
I think there's
Durkin's gone. Heather Anderson's gone.
The sentiment that I heard, and and I listen, Alex, I listen to sports talk radio all day long, and a lot of the sentiment was, let's wait and see. We don't know all the facts, and then it turned into, well, let's not overreact. People were saying, well, what we tend to do is we fire everybody rather than just the person who's responsible. So in some instances, I did hear a lot of pandering and a lot of excuse making and things like that. But at the end of the day, what people don't come back to is that somebody died. It's like some people say, well, yeah, that's tragic, but someone's child died, and it was negligent. I mean, this is not a court,
right.
But there was alleged negligence with something that could have been prevented. It wasn't
there was alleged abuse,
and it wasn't a bad hit where a kid, got hit or injured on the football field and died. It wasn't that. This was a situation where a kid showed signs of not being well, and he was not cared for. So I really feel like that's indefensible, and we can go through the legal ramblings and things like that. But
we've been through the legal ramblings. I mean, is there a negligent homicide, charge? Doesn't look like it. But let's leave it at this. And this is a transition, I think, here, Rich. DJ Durkin is not a venerable name in college football coaching. If you had a venerable name, if this happened to Nick Saban or Urban Meyer or somebody like that, I don't think the University of Maryland's response would have been the same. DJ Durkin can be dumped, and they can find another DJ Durkin that can govern a mediocre Division I program. If this happened at Alabama, or Ohio State, completely different story.
Yeah, well, so we're gonna. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think, and that gives us a great segue, guys. We're going to continue to watch this University of Maryland situation. It's not like, and as you said, see, it's not like DJ Durkin was winning a ton of games. I mean, his hard ass approach definitely didn't translate to the field. So this is something that we're going to continue to watch. And then again, I just want to say, in this conversation, it should not be lost that that 19-year-old Jordan McNair did lose his life, and we wish the family well moving forward. But transitioning into another bigger situation and I hate saying this, the Ohio State University, where Urban Meyer is in a bit of in the hot water now. We can debate on how hot that water is because he just had a 3-game suspension. So I don't know how hot that water is, but just to lay the foundation is that there are allegations that Urban Meyer knew and covered up his former wide receivers coach's domestic abuse transgressions. And there was some discussion on what he knew, what he didn't know, and what he should have reported and what he shouldn't have, what he should have reported and what he didn't report, allegedly. So, guys, let's talk about the Ohio State University with Urban Meyer, who's only lost 3 games in his tenure there.
Yeah, well, first of all,
is it only 3 games?
Yeah,
really?
I'll go fact check that, but it's I know it's a single-digit number.
Yeah, it's not a lot.
Okay.
This is part 2 on It's Just Business with this Urban Meyer story, and the reason why we're addressing it again is that since the last show, because we talked about this on the last show, since the last show, Ohio State has finished its investigation, and we saw a press conference which from the athletic director, the president of the university, and Urban Meyer, which I think might possibly be the worst press conference in the history of the recorded medium. In the history of recorded media. Just an awful press conference. Urban Meyer actually then had to apologize for the press conference on Twitter, which he did, which also came across as too little too late. And then the next thing that happened is that on Friday, this past Friday, Ohio State's investigative report was released to the public. And what we have seen, and so let's unpack all this. The investigative report that was released to the public was 23 pages. It was a summary. It did not release all the documents. It was just a summary. And in essence, it acknowledged that Urban Meyer knew about the 2009 incident with Zach Smith. Zach Smith is the former receivers coach. And this happened while Meyer and Smith were at Florida. There was a domestic violence abuse allegation. Smith was never charged because his wife basically did not want to cooperate at the end of it. When Meyer was hired at Ohio State, when Zach Smith was hired at Ohio State, Urban Meyer did not tell Ohio State about this incident, according to the report, because Meyer, in his view, said that he was never charged, and Meyer didn't ever believe that Smith abused his wife, and so he didn't mention it. Number one. And then number 2, a whole lot of other things happened. There was another abuse allegation in 2015, which the report concluded Meyer was aware of, sort of, but not aware of everything. There was allegations of Smith running up massive credit card tabs on recruiting events at strip clubs. There were allegations of sexual misconduct in the Ohio State offices. Also, there was an allegation that, not an allegation, the report said that Smith had to go to drug rehab for an addiction to, I believe it was an ADHD medication on Meyer's recommendation that was never reported. And what we've also concluded, what the report also concluded and glossed over and didn't really address, but just mentioned it, was that Meyer's contract requires, the reporting requirements established by Urban Meyer's contract said he had to report these types of misconducts to his boss, which is the athletic director, and to the university compliance office, which he did not do. And so Meyer did breach his contract by not reporting this to the university compliance office. Now, final thing. Let's talk about, so he was suspended by 3 games, and this press conference he gave, Urban Meyer looked like he had swallowed his cat. He looked like he was mad the entire time, looked like he was not sympathetic at all. He never apologized to Miss Smith. Didn't even mention her until the very end, and one of the reporters asked him about it, and his response was, well, I'm sorry, we're all in this situation, which is a far cry from, I could have and should have done more, and I'm so sorry that I allowed your husband to continue beating you and did not do anything to stop it, which is what he should have said. And so Meyer did a lot of things wrong. But the last thing is, his suspension is a suspension only in the loosest possible terms. The suspension only means that he cannot be there on game day. He can continue to coach the team during the week, which means he can establish the game plans and everything else. He just can't be there on game day. And so that's a suspension only in the very loosest possible terms. But thoughts?
I mean, it sounds like it's similar to what we're talking about with Maryland, where you just aren't. These coaches think they're, Christ walking on water. Basically, they don't care if bad things happen on their watch. Now I don't know how much you can blame a guy for maybe believing his assistant over the assistant's wife. Obviously, I think you need to look into those kind of things. But we've all known people who have domestic situations that aren't ideal. It's tough, and you can't just you shouldn't take either side's word for it, blindly, but you got to kind of look into it and be, above board about it. So, that part is just awful, but, covering for him on, these expense reports, that's not good. That's not going to get you fired, though.
Rich?
Well, I think that there are a couple of things, and SI did a really in-depth article on, and they highlighted 4 reasons why Urban Meyer wasn't fired. A couple of reasons being, one was the contractual language and being afraid to sort of take on that legal fight. Urban Meyer makes $38 million a year. The second being
no. He didn't make $38 million a year. There was $38 million left on his contract in total.
$38 million.
Right.
Thank you for that.
Which they would have to pay out most of it. It sounds like.
I think that my first thing is, why fall on your sword for a wide receivers coach? I mean, you can find another wide receivers coach, but I also believe in what you said, Alice. These guys think that they have this godlike complex that they can make anything go away, and. Mm-hmm. In essence, I think that ultimately what this encompasses is a slap on the wrist for Urban Meyer, and we can debate on whether the punishment fits the crime. But this is a big time, as you alluded to earlier, Steve, this is a big time college football program, probably top 3 in the country. And Urban Meyer is one of the greatest college football coaches in college football history. Right. So unlike DJ Durkin, you can't find another Urban Meyer. So
No, Urban Meyer is probably the second best coach right now.
And so, it's not, so maybe the university is saying, okay, what's the path of least resistance here? 3-game suspension, and let's move on. But I think that the issue that's not being, the issue that we always seem to come back to is the balance between morality and law and what you can legally do and what's morally right and things like that. And we just haven't seemed to find the middle ground. And as we talked about earlier, what is more important than winning football games?
Making money. That's what's more important. First of all, let's clarify one thing. The contractual issue is that if the university can establish that Urban Meyer breached his contract, then they would not have to pay out the contract. If they dismissed Urban Meyer not for cause, meaning not because Meyer breached his contract, then they would have to pay out the contract. So the debate would be, did he breach his contract? And they just don't want to fight that fight. True. But more importantly, they don't want to lose the prestige that comes with having the second greatest, one of the greatest coaches ever, and the second best coach in the NCAA right now. Ohio State lost a lot of credibility when Jim Tressel was there. Jim Tressel didn't have the cachet, he didn't have the success, and he got fired in part because he got himself in hot water, which is another story for another day. But also, Ohio State had no desire to protect Jim Tressel because he wasn't succeeding, whereas Urban Meyer is succeeding. So that's number one. Now, strictly speaking, Meyer breached his contract. Okay, he did breach his contract, which is why the university's only remedy isn't just termination. The university has as a remedy in the contract that they can suspend him, and that's what they chose to do. So there's no debate he breached his contract. In my view, he failed to report properly. The reason why he's defending this wide receivers coach is because the wide receivers coach is the grandson of Urban Meyer's mentor when Urban Meyer was a young coach. So this is why he's been protecting this kid. The guy's not a kid. This is why he's been protecting this guy all these years. The report concluded, the Ohio State's investigative report concluded that Meyer's judgment was clouded by his affinity for the family. Okay, and so that is the reason for this, and so this is the reason why Meyer has put up with this all these years. Meyer knows about this. There's allegations that Meyer's wife, going back all the way to Florida, but that Meyer's wife was communicating with Miss Smith, and that Shelley Meyer, who's Urban Meyer's wife, told Meyer about this either in text messages or privately. And we'll never know that. And I'd like to point out one factoid which I thought was very telling. The report noted that there was a request made by the Ohio State newspaper for Urban Meyer's text messages on his phone, and presumably the phone belongs to Ohio State, otherwise they wouldn't be entitled to it.
Right.
That request was never formally passed on to Urban Meyer, but after that happened, the report stated that Meyer asked his IT people how to delete text messages that were more than a year old. What does that tell you? That tells you that, and that isn't an allegation, that's a fact. What we don't know is whether it was actually happened or not, but nobody has text messages older than a year. That tells me that Meyer has been communicating with Smith, and there was something in there he didn't want to know. He didn't want the public to know.
Yeah, that's not good. And the one thing, I always come back to this with Urban Meyer. Pete, as much success as he had at Florida, there were also rumors back then about a lot of shady things going on when he was at
Aaron
Florida.
Hernandez.
Yeah, there was there were a lot of guys who were trouble on that team, and Tim Tebow kind of whitewashed the whole thing because he was Tim Tebow. But if you look at those players he had, there were a lot of guys who got in a lot of trouble there. And I think he's one of these coaches that he's going to turn to a pretty big blind eye to anybody with talent.
There's no doubt about that. I mean, you're exactly right. Florida had rivaled Miami for troublemakers, and I think you're exactly right in saying that Tim Tebow covered up a lot because Tim Tebow had such a big following and he was so respected, and you can debate his injection of religion into his public persona. I don't want to go there right now. The point is that Tim Tebow is beloved by a lot of people, and he covered up for a lot. Those Florida teams had a whole lot of troublemakers. Probably Aaron Hernandez was leading the pack for sure, but he wasn't nearly the only one. There were a lot of arrests and a lot of allegations and a lot of horrible conduct, and certainly Urban Meyer has proven he doesn't care about any of that. He wants to win. He'll bring anybody in if they will win. Help him win.
Right.
I mean, I think it's a fair question to ask is, I mean, at the end of the day, was this or is this I'm getting ready to say a different word. Was this was this a fireable offense? And for him, and I mean fireable. I mean whether from the public standpoint, we always want like the highest level of we want blood, we want someone to be fired, and I think it is a fair question to say.
It's the
is this? Let's take the fact that it is Urban Meyer, if we can. Is this truly something that you should be fired for? And I'm not quite sure. I don't know. I
think Urban Meyer could gun down a child in the streets of Columbus at 12 noon on a Wednesday, and he wouldn't be fired. That's hyperbole, obviously. I think Ohio State University will do absolutely everything it can to not have to fire Urban Meyer. I think they don't want to fire Urban Meyer no matter what. I think he could get away with damn near anything and within reason. I mean, obviously, if he was accused of murder, I'm just being,
right.
It's hyperbole.
Well, no, we get it.
I think I think that at the end of the day, the money train rules everything. Nobody cares that Zach Smith beat his wife and ran up a $600, credit card bill on a university credit card at a strip club. Nobody gives two craps about that whatsoever.
That's called recruiting, Steve. That's all that is.
Yeah, and nobody cares. The only thing that matters is that Urban Meyer means millions and millions of dollars to Ohio State, and Ohio State couldn't care less about Zach Smith or what Zach Smith did. That's my thought.
I think that's probably, the truth of it. Now, if you were asked what the right thing is, Urban Meyer should have been fired for a lot of.
Should have been fired at Florida.
Yeah. There's many reasons why he should not be a head coach. I honestly don't think he should have been fired for this per se. I think Smith clearly, he should have been fired.
Shouldn't have been hired in the first place.
Probably, I mean, what he might be a good wide receivers coach, but you had to see this as a PR nightmare at some point, right? And you just don't hire.
I think that if Urban Meyer's name was DJ Durkin, they would have fired him.
Oh yes,
Put it that
maybe.
Way. Yeah, or John Smith or anybody else.
I don't know. Yeah, I honestly don't know if. I think he would have definitely been suspended, and maybe for more than this. But I think the softball is for him.
And I think and normally we say this is something that we're going to continue to watch. That's Chris's thing, but I watch for what? Yeah, there's not. It's not. That's what I was going to say. There's really not much else to watch except when's the first game?
It's in like a week, I think.
Right.
Isn't it?
I mean, and the other thing, what do these coaches do on suspension? Is he texting plays in?
They roll around in money.
He's barely suspended. He just doesn't have to. Can't be there on Friday on Saturday. That's it. Yeah. He's going to do the game plan. He's going to coach his team. He may not get paid, and I'm sure he wants his money. But the man makes millions of dollars a year. He'll be fine. He's not going to have to skip lunch.
Yeah.
Because he's going to not get paid for 3 weeks. It's a suspension in name only, and nothing's going to change. And
if anything, it's going to be a nicer lunch that Sunday
Saturday he has more time.
Afternoon.
I'm sure he's going to be hovering over his phone, texting stuff into the coaches. So it's about money. I hate to be so cynical, but it's about money. It's about power, and the only thing that matters to the University of Maryland or to Ohio State University, Ohio State University is continuing
the Ohio State
train.
University.
It's keep the train rolling. Yeah. Keep the money rolling in. Keep the football program succeeding because that means money. That's all they care about.
And again, Rich mentioned earlier, there's a disconnect between what is morally right and what is going to happen.
Definitely.
I'm surprised though.
That's
we can talk about this another time, but I'm actually surprised with such a pattern of alleged sexual misconduct, and I'm surprised actually that Congress hasn't gotten involved. With this.
Well, in the case of the UMD thing, the Department of Education's getting involved.
Yeah.
They're going to start looking into it because federal money was spent, it sounds like, on covering up that assault, the sexual assault.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it'll be the Department of Education kind of looking into it. I am surprised that there isn't small, working at the department, I'm surprised there isn't like one or two lawyers whose job isn't to just look into this stuff now.
Yeah, there may be, but the football coach is very powerful, and the basketball coach is very powerful. They better hope that there's like a Michigan grad, in the Department of Education. Maybe they'll take an objective view of it.
Well.
They tend to only go for Ivy League kids.
That's true.
Unfortunately, as I said, I'd say, hey, this is something to keep for us to watch. But actually, Ohio State plays Oregon State next Saturday, September 1st. So I'm sure
that means it's over.
Yeah, so during his suspension, they play Oregon State, they play Rutgers, and they play TCU. TCU is the only ranked team out of those three. So I'm sure they can get along without Urban Meyer for those.
Yeah.
Oh, Oregon State. I was thinking, wait, isn't Oregon State? No, wait, other
Oregon State.
Yeah.
So not exactly challenging teams.
So, well, guys, I am pleased to have stepped in for my homeboy Chris Larry. And so where can we find you guys? Steve, where
can we address one more? I want to address one more thing before we go.
Okay.
Because I have to bring this up. And I don't want to spend too much time on it, but they announced a Tiger and Phil pay-per-view golf thing this week.
It's a charity thing, right?
It's not a it's not a charity
game.
thing.
No,
it's the winner gets $9 million. That's
okay.
I think it's $9 million. Meaning $500,000 a hole.
It's the charity of Tiger Woods
or Phil Mickelson. Yeah, it's charity. One of those two things. This seems like it's completely ridiculous to me. I don't know who on earth is going to pay. The amount of the pay-per-view has not been announced. Meaning the cost of it, rather. Who's going to pay for this?
Golf
you
clubs.
guys going to watch?
Well, first off, it's going to be $99.99 because that's what all pay-per-views are now.
Well, the rumor, the New York Post said the rumor was it was going to be in the $40 range.
Oh, okay. That's surprisingly cheap.
Well, who's going to pay for a golf pay-per-view? That's what I'm wondering. I didn't mean to extend the show, but I had to bring
grumpy old men who just sit around and think golf is a real sport.
There will be people that will actually pay and watch. I have some friends who are like really into golf, and I have no doubt they may not admit it, but they will hover at someone's house or at some country club, at their golf club, and actually watch this.
Right.
So, and we've talked about niche sports here on this show before, and
there's no more niche sport
right.
than
And
golf.
I'm sure that there will be all kinds of analysis, and I wonder if they'll have one of those things on the NFL where they draw on the screen the different X's and O's and plays like that. So it'll be
there's no X's and O's in golf. It's
I won't be watching.
I don't buy any pay-per-view, so I'm not the right person to ask. But the thing is, I think golf used to be a niche sport. Tiger Woods has made it mainstream. You guys might not be golf fans, and that's fine. But Tiger Woods is certainly in his heyday, and it's coming back around, is such a ubiquitous name that it's become a mainstream thing, And I just find it interesting that I don't know if this is the future, and this may be another topic for another day. I find it interesting that they're putting golf on pay-per-view. Pay-per-view has historically been the purview of boxing and professional wrestling,
right.
And now in the past couple of years, the UFC, which is there's another combat sport.
See, I actually think golf makes a lot of sense because it's not like you have a season of golf. There's no national champion.
There is a national champion. There
tournament.
is. It's called the FedEx Cup, which is going on right now. And there is a golf season. It goes from March into September, and it finishes with the FedEx Cup. And so there is exactly that nowadays. And the thing is, I can't watch Money Mayweather on HBO on Saturday. On the wrestling pay-per-views, I can't watch Hulk Hogan, in a normal match. I can watch Tiger and Phil every single weekend playing on free TV.
I think that's a great point, and I think that's the arrogance of this event. So it's interesting. I just recently bought a piece of memorabilia. I have a poster from the one of the promotion posters from the Marvin Hagler Tommy Hearns fight back in 1985, and the closed circuit. I don't know any of you guys are old school, but you go to the Capitol Center and you pay. It was $18 to go, and back then, pay-per-view or closed circuit TV was more out of a necessity to get the sport out to more people. Of course, you make money. But now the arrogance, where, as Steve, you made a great point, you could easily have this on regular TV. But somehow, no, Tiger's arguably the greatest golfer ever, and you have his nemesis, Phil Mickelson, and they're actually believe that people are going to want to, en masse, are going to want to pay and watch this when it can easily be on television.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, and it just makes me wonder, are we going to see the NFL put games on pay-per-view, and are we going to see basketball do
because
this?
Because the NFL and real sports are going to go online on demand streaming like everyone else is. Pay-per-views for people who are stuck in the 1980s. It's an outdated concept.
Except that
pay-per-view goes away with it.
Except that pay-per-view boxing makes millions and millions.
It makes money, but it's not going to be around in 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think boxing, and we've talked about this before, I think boxing pay-per-view events are more just as much of a social event as it is an athletic event. I mean, just think of like back in the days, people would gather around the radio. They would go to people's houses who had the better radio. It's just the same. It was the same thing with boxing. So I think boxing got pay-per-view right. I mean, unfortunately, nowadays, there's not many fights that you would want to see, but pay-per-view golf, please. No way.
Like, there's no way I would buy any pay-per-view for $100 and watch it at my home by myself. I'm not going to. First of all, I'm not going to buy it anyway, and I'm not going to host any.
If you're going to do it, you have people come over and everyone chips in.
And if anybody knows me, knows I'm never going to host a party at my house ever. So I would never. This is not me.
And you're not going to go to somebody's house.
No, I'm not. That's just not me. Yeah. But I mean, I'm a weird exception to that. Point is, you're right, Rich. You're right. It's a social event, and I just don't know if people are going to invite 20 people over the house to watch Tiger and Phil play golf.
How long is it going to take? Too
4 hours.
That's probably 4 hours. You think? I mean, that's a lot longer than a boxing match.
I mean, and they'll probably throw verbal jabs at each other. You know, like, okay, all right, Phil, let's make this interesting, and you say this, and I'm going to insult your pants.
But you know, unless one of them swings a club at the other, it's not worth watching.
It's just crazy. That's arrogant.
I just mean the difference here is that you can see Tiger and Phil literally every weekend almost from between March and September.
Yeah.
You know, that's the difference.
All right, are we done golf talk?
No.
I'm sorry, Alex.
Yeah, and like I said, I think that the real, long term, like I said, online streaming and on demand through that is going to be where everything goes. You know, like it's just cheaper. The infrastructure's already there, and that's the future for everybody. Not just the big sports. The little sports are already doing it too. So just accept that because that's coming.
I didn't mean to start a whole big thing, but I had to bring that up.
Well, nothing like golf talk to end the show. Guys, anything else you want to get off?
Oh, by the way, I looked it up. Golf gets less ratings than soccer, Steve. It's
anything else you want to get off your chest?
Golf. No. Golf ratings in the United States are legit. They get the men's PGA Tour gets big ratings, huge ratings.
It gets like a 6 share.
Particularly when Tiger is in contention on Sunday, the ratings spike dramatically. It's way bigger ratings than soccer could ever hope to get in the United States.
6-1 soccer was the best for. I was looking at something on Hollywood Reporter. I closed it, but for one of the PGA events, its highest was 6-1. Soccer was getting a 7-something.
You're talking about the World Cup. The MLS gets almost is not on TV at all.
Oh, no, I'm not counting.
You're
MLS.
talking about once every 4
league.
years, Olympic style. The comparable to the World Cup is really the Olympics, not the average annual sports season of any sports. You know, and soccer in this country is MLS, and MLS is barely is a blip on the sports radar.
Yeah, I agree with you there, but
soccer will always suck, no matter what.
We talked about that on the last show, so it's football.
I couldn't let Alex get away with that.
Ratings are higher.
All right, guys, that wraps up another It's Just Business. Tell us, Steve, where can they find you, if at all?
They can't find me at all individually, but you can. I am usually paying attention to the Hogsty on Twitter.
And Alex, where can we find you? Alex.
Well, do you want my home address or what? No, at Alex35332 on Twitter. Right. And
you can find me always on Twitter at DiscoQ5, DiscoQue5. On Twitter, I am at just over 200 followers, and I am so content with that. All right, guys, and that's it for another episode of It's Just Business. Have a great week.
The Hogsty is brought to you by TicketClub.com, your one-stop shop for live events nationwide. Whether you're looking for game, theater, or live performance tickets, don't sweat it. TicketClub.com has you covered. So make sure you're going there for all your live entertainment needs, and make sure you're clicking over to them from the banner at the top of thehogsty.com.